Stills. 8 days out to the NFL draft. 8 days until we get to the NFL draft. I went back and I watched that Howie Roseman presser. And boy, do we have a lot of content off that presser. I'm not sure what to believe. You know, what's crazy is I go over to my Twitter page. We bring up some issues with some things that we would like some answers to. And you get criticized for asking questions about a football team that's underachieved for 30 years. And you have set a bar here where you're hoping that the franchise does some of the right things. But to me, again, Howie and Associates at that press conference yesterday, that pre-draft presser, was filled with arrogance at best. Don't ever question a conversation that somebody asked a legitimate question to when it came to the Hassan Reddick deal. I mean, he sat there, basically, the general manager, and he belittled the question that the reporter asked because he didn't like to answer that. All I'm asking you is, hey, man, you're going to give one of those press conferences. Don't be an asshole. There's no reason for it. Guy's there doing his gig. Guy's doing his gig. That's all. 304. Reddick signed yet? Thank you very much, dude. Don't ask the Hassan Reddick deal. Man, seems to be a pretty touchy subject there. You know what? Quite frankly, I learned a lot off that presser yesterday on how he operating and how he sees his offseason. And we're going to get into it. Look at this. I wrote down a ton of stuff here. I watched it twice. Howie Roseman, look, and I think you have to have a sense of arrogance about you when you're in a position like that. So I don't want to go too nuts on that. I think you have to be, look, confidence and arrogance are, I think, the same thing. I do. I think they're the same thing. Especially when you're in a high-powered position like that to make that kind of decisions. I learned a lot, though. And quite frankly, I think there was a lot of things that were answered for me on who actually runs that football team. Okay, some people are really looking dumb after saying Reddick would get a $30 million a year contract. Crowley, I told you, he'll never get that. He didn't even get a pay raise in New York. Do you understand how shitty that deal is? And he is getting a pick. He's right. It's contingent whether it's a second or third. That's all he had to say. But quite frankly, get this. Why don't you just keep the guy? Make him play through his final year. Keep him on the team. And he had a problem answering that. You know why? He can't. It's a shitty move. There are so many things that were answered. And by the way, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pose them to you. I'm going to pose them to you. And you tell me if I read them right. And then we can all be on the same page. Get this. What was this? Reddick was never going to get $30 million. Reddick was never going to get $17 million. Reddick was never going to get $15.5. They didn't want the player. They didn't want the player anymore for whatever reason. And by the way, I told you it was because Vic didn't want him. We learned so much on who runs that football team with that press conference. And I'm going to make a point to you. And again, I'm going to play all of this out for you. Okay? By the way, what was Nick Sirianni doing at that press conference? He has no say in anything. What was he there for? the theatrics of it. Even when asked the question, he had to defer to Howie. What exactly is he doing there? So did you watch the press conference where Nakobe Dean came out? I didn't, okay? Senor, we're all going to get on the same page today. I'm going to make it a priority for everyone and all of us in case I read something wrong here. Okay? We're all going to get on the same page. By the way, at 3:30, we're simulcasting with Cowboy Nation and Eagle Nation. The two best rivals in the NFC East are going to go back and forth. And I'm going to drill Mark on his Cowboys, and he is going to try to drill me on the Eagles. And if you have questions in the chat box at the time, and they're good, I'll pose them to him. So we're simulcasting with his Dallas Cowboy followers and subscribers and ours here at JAKIB. That's at 3:30. Okay? We're going to start doing a ton of that. By the way, we're going to do that every Wednesday at 3:30. Okay? Steve goes, drill Mark, please. I don't really think it's that hard. Hey, personally, it's not about drilling Mark. It's about asking what the Cowboys aren't doing. It's not going to be that hard to drill, Steve, the Cowboys when you haven't done crap this offseason or for 30 years. How hard is that going to be? It's got nothing to do with Mark. It's got everything to do with the team he covers. And look at Senor. That's going to be a short-ass conversation. Sills, confidence and arrogance can yield positive outcomes. When they turn into ego and pride, they become negatives. That's a great take. That's a spectacular take. Spectacular. All right. Big Sills takeaways from General Manager Howie Roseman's pre-draft presser. Okay. Did he not say in that presser that Vic Fangio, for the last 3 years, has had input in the personnel and has been mentors to the last two coordinators? He said that. Howie Roseman said that. Well, my take on Hassan Reddick not being on the Philadelphia Eagles, when all of you questioned me and said that was not his decision. Turns out it was. From the general manager's mouth. It was Fangio's call not to have Hassan Reddick on the team. Confirmed. Yes or no? I'll pull my trigger finger up for the company. Yes or no? That was Vic's call. That Reddick's not on this team. Hold on, LJ. I'm so glad LJ's here. LJ, the general manager, takeaway one, said Vic Fangio has had input over the personnel and mentorship of the last two coordinators on our defense. Yes or no? Yes. Vic Fangio didn't want Reddick on the team. Validated. Validated. Okay. Free agency out of the mouth of Roseman and Associates. Here, I want to check these off. Because I don't want to repeat myself, because I don't want to seem redundant here. Arguing with yourself? No. When everyone in here, including some of the people that I talk to, even on my company, guys getting a little upset on posting stuff. I'm right. Free agency fills gaps. No, gaps is code for mistakes. How many gaps have you filled on defense? Gardner Johnson, the two corners, two of your four, no, Huff, Devin White. 5 of your starting 11 are mistakes on defense. Free agency. How can you have half your unit with mistakes? Yes or no? Filling gaps. Validated. Gaps is code for mistakes in the draft. Yes or no? Okay. So, Hassan Reddick wasn't wanted by... Oh, no, I'm excited, not triggered. I'm excited. Oh, I'm excited because I'm right. I told you Vic Fangio didn't want, and that's why Huff's here. The mistakes in the draft, how he calls gaps. It's a slick lawyer's word. Let's move on to another one. Reddick says, or he says on the Reddick deal, it's a win-win. How is that a win-win? You don't get any restitution for 3 years. How's that a win? The Jets win. The Jets, hey, Brian, it's a win-win? Well, wait a minute. The Jets get a 3rd-round compensation pick if they don't sign him, and he goes somewhere else at the same price the Eagles were paying and would have paid this year. How's that a win for the Eagles? And since when is he going to turn that 2nd or 3rd round pick into a win when he never wins? That's right, Flex. That's not a win. That's not a win. So 3 things I've just pointed out in that fireside chat have turned out to be total bullshit. Reddick's deal, Vic didn't want him on the team. He fills his free agency or mistakes, calls them gaps. Half the defensive unit is mistakes. And you've got draft picks who are even bigger mistakes than a starting lineup in Smith and Dean. You're going to have to replace 7 of the 11 players on defense with gaps or mistakes. Okay. So the last 3 years, he's had say. All right. Here, we got a ton more here. This further validates Fangio had input in the last 2 drafts. So, in essence, these are Vic's guys. He may know how to build them, but whatever. You're right, dude. How about this? So you're trying to tell me Vic Fangio had say in the hirings of Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith? If that's the case, this is scary. Scary. Hey, get this. Anything that LJ or anything these other guys are saying has nothing to do with what Howie exposed of your organization. This is not about me. This is the general manager answering questions about his mistakes or gap defense the last 3 years. Who has had say in the personnel? If you could get rid of Hassan Reddick, you brought in Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean. The GM said it. The general manager said it. This is exciting. It's exciting when you know that things that you've been saying have been dead on right. No. There's no conspiracy here. Go back and watch. See, LJ is lying. I watched the presser 3 times. And I'll get to another one here. Howie makes all player decisions. He, in theory, is the head guy in the final decision of the role. When Nick was asked the question, what kind of player do you want? Well, a lot goes in. Quote, a Jeff McClain quote, a lot goes in to the decision-making that Howie has to make in the end. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And there is an app. Thank you very much, Swaggy. And when it gets down to his final decision, you know that he has done a lot of due diligence and homework on the player. In theory, Nick never answered the question. He has no say. As I told you, the man who puts every head coach that's ever been in the building since Andy Reid, the man who has put the rosters together is the GM. The coaches have no say. Zero. Validated today when Nick even said it himself. No say at all in the direction of the building of the roster. Your head coach has no say in what players he brings in. None. Howie does a lot of work, and his final decision, all you got to do is go back and watch it. These are his words, not my takes. So when your head coach is trying to build a game plan and you have lesser players and you know can't play, you got to play them anyway. Why? Because your general manager drafted them, or you're fired if you don't play them. Brian, except Vic? Yeah. Howie Roseman gives more autonomy to Vic Fangio in player decisions than the head football coach. That's what came out of that press conference. Hey, DRC is trying to spin what your GM said yesterday as me calling it negative when I'm just reiterating what they said. Am I wrong, folks? Did I read it wrong when the general manager said that the Vic Fangio's had say over the personnel the last 3 years in the direction of the team and mentorship of the last 2 coordinators? He's had a lot of say in it, which means he didn't want Reddick on the team. The Reddick deal is not a win-win. These are all things that were said yesterday. It's not regurgitating something. It's validating it. Am I reading this wrong? How am I reading that wrong? Listen yourselves. Some people refuse to listen to the truth. Sills, Howie's not wrong about free agent covering gaps, but only when you hit on your draft, when you miss in the draft, like Howie has. Free agency is a tool that is used to hide your mistakes. That's right. There'll be 7 players at the end of the day that will have to be replaced on defense by the start of September. Here's something else that, for me, tells you everything you need to know. When asked the question about the young players getting extended, especially on the offensive side, this is what he said. Well, you know this. If you get drafted in Philadelphia, you're not going anywhere. And that this is a place where you don't have to go anywhere. That's not a reason to keep a guy on the team because he was drafted to the Eagles. That's validating yourself. That is the worst thing that you can ever hear a guy say. That if you make a mistake in the draft, you'll hang on to that mistake and not move off of that mistake because you drafted him. Hence, Nakobe Dean should not be on your roster. He's not good enough. Zach Cunningham is better. Nolan Smith should not be starting. Jordan Davis should have been replaced by Milton Williams. That's not a reason to keep a guy on the team, is because you drafted him. These are all 3 things. Get this. Here's Big Trag. 3 straight playoffs. And you know what it resulted in? Nothing. Nothing. 0. 0. No. Jason says you heard what you wanted to. I'll go back over it one last time. When asked the question on personnel, direct quote from Howie Roseman. Sirianni. Howie makes a lot of time and effort with his people to do as much evaluating. And when you are looking at a player, he has done so much due diligence on that player and homework. You don't realize how much work goes into before they make their final decision and he makes the final call. Quote, he picks the roster. Exactly what Doug Peterson was saying. That's not an opinion. That's a fact, Jason. Not talking about that. I'm talking about when he said, we want to keep guys. No, he said this. You know this. When you are drafted here to Philadelphia, you don't have to go anywhere because you know this will be a place for you. If I draft you and you don't show up and you're not good, you're fired. I'm not keeping you because I drafted you. I'm keeping you because you're good. And when he says that, hey, when you're drafted in the National Football League, you're expected to be great. And if you're not, you are criticized. You're not on a bell curve here. I mean, the Reddick deal was bittersweet. Does that mean you wanted to keep him, Howie? But Vic had to say, and that's how he got the job, because he had to have autonomy in the personnel, that he blew out a guy who had given you 27 sacks in 2 years. Vic made that call? Wow. Holy shit. I mean, Howie makes all player decisions. That story's true now. What Doug said about the Thursday roster, the inactives and the actives. It's true. Free agency fills gaps, mistakes. Dude says Reddick was a win-win. Okay, if you're an Eagle, you don't have to go anywhere. There's no reason. Vic has been the biggest influence that we have had in our defense the last 3 years. They don't believe in drafting cornerbacks. They haven't drafted a cornerback in the first round in 20 years, Lito Shepherd. You know why? They can't pick one. Get this. Not anything I said here is an opinion. Sills, admitting the second contracts do not need to be earned and they are given is absolute craziness. Oh, Jordan Davis is getting a second contract. I am a contract employee and I don't produce, I get fired. My contract is not renewed. Okay? Like I said, not one thing I told you here is an opinion. This is him with his arrogance at the podium. I couldn't tell who the head coach was and the general manager. I couldn't tell who was in charge. Well, I've done it by the end of the presser, I did. He makes complete decisions. You hear what he said also about game planning? We talk every day. We're involved in every decision that's made. So were you involved in the decision to pull Sean Desai and fire 2 coordinators inside of 1 year? Was that also your call? It had to be. He said it. We have conversations every day. We're involved in the game planning. We're involved in preparation. And we talk with the coaches every day. So that just didn't parachute in to replace Sean Desai. Howie parachuted in and replaced him because he panicked. And he's not a football guy. He said it. He said it. All you have to do is go back and listen to your interview. And for those of you that don't and want to make things that didn't happen at that presser, this is why when I talk, people hate when I talk. You know why? I tell you what they said. Very little of this is opinion. I take people's words and I use it against them. So Fitness says you make it up. I made up that Vic Fangio's had decision-making on personnel and scheme the last 3 years. Howie said it. I'm the one that said, when Sirianni said that this guy makes all the player decisions, I didn't say that. Nick said that. Filling mistakes with free agency, I didn't say that. Howie said that. I didn't say any of this. I said none of it. Howie Roseman controls every single thing that football team does on a daily basis. There is no getting around it. He is an absolute control freak. And it gets in his way. Validated. The Reddick deal is a win-win. You know he's a bullshit artist when he says it. And like Xander says, go get me Surtain. I don't trust the guy. You're right. Howie Roseman is the biggest control freak in this NFL next to Jerry Jones. I've never seen a general manager have more control. He's a control freak. Seals, the real issue is that Howie does not give players he drafts the tools required to succeed unless they are in the O-line. The O-line has a coach with skills to make players better. Very good. And nicely said. That's exactly right, Bob. There's no coincidence that the most skill set position on your team is your O-line. Why? That's where your best coaches are in your O-line. And now you have Jason Kelce. On top of that, you're always going to have good O-line because you have the best O-line coach. And how about this one? Now it was and is being reported that Bill Belichick was seriously being considered to replace your golden child, Nick Sirianni. Once again, I have Howie Roseman and the organization and Jeffrey Lurie are more concerned with control instead of championships. That's why you're 1-3. That's the frustrating thing that I bring up here every day. It's frustrating. And you should be frustrated. You should be frustrated that the owner of the football team and his general manager puppet constantly get in the way of success. How about this? They don't get in the way of success. They get in the way of ultimate success. Everything I've been telling you, the GM, and again, you know what's great? I don't have to have a soundbite posted. I could just repost Howie's press conference. That's all I have to do. And all the things that I said were expressed by the general manager yesterday. Brian, help me out here. Tell me I'm wrong. Did you read that presser any other way? All they care about is revenue and sales. Players don't matter. Coaches don't matter. Wins don't matter. It's a law firm. That's frustrating. That's frustrating. Sills, Jeffrey Lurie was not getting in the way at all. Now he is reasons why we got Fangio. Okay. When you say that your owner is not in the way, and this is why you got Fangio, do you think Nick Sirianni hired Vic Fangio? Who hired Vic Fangio? Brian, all you have to do is look at our chat room here. 70% of them are giving excuses. Hey, you want to look at excuses? Look at my Twitter line, Jacob's, the Eagles, anybody's. I'll show you excuses. No, I'm not saying we're making them. I'm saying people posting them. And I'm talking about fans. All you got to do is listen to the press conference. Howie Roseman's the biggest control freak on the planet. And it's why they don't win the ultimate. They win just enough to tease the fans. Once again, did I read that? Did you listen to a different press conference? Because I'd like to get on the same page with you, Anthony. Everybody. I'd like to get on the same page with you. How did you read that press conference and what they said and what Howie said? Did you really read it any other way? I'd like to know. I'd like to know how you read it. I told you. I want to get on the same page. Here's DRC. If Nick had missed the playoffs 3 years in a row, what would you say? Why are you thinking about hiring Bill Belichick? If the general manager doesn't have with the owner complete control and you've made the playoffs 3 years in a row, aren't you answering your own question? Why were you seriously considering hiring Bill Belichick then? I thought there was a lot answered there. We found out the general manager picks the roster. We found out the general manager picks the coaches. We found out the general manager gave autonomy to Vic Fangio. We found out that Vic Fangio threw off Hassan Reddick off the team, your best defender. We found out that Howie Roseman, if he drafts you, wants you, keeps you, no matter what, even if you're not producing. I mean, I learned a lot. What did you not learn? Flexen, was there something I said that was not factual that they said? Even you, Xander. Did I say something that's not factual? I'd like to know. Because, hey, sometimes things land for people differently. And I'm just asking an honest question. Flexing, I'm just, like you said. LJ goes, we don't obsess over every word. It wasn't it didn't it answer questions for you on why you had a meltdown last year? Who's in charge? When things hit the fan, you can't coach a football team from an owner's box in a GM's box. There lies your problem. Fans keep drinking the Kool-Aid on No to McKinstry. I'm with you, man. I'm the more I watch him, I saw they brought Cooper DeJean in. Okay? Hey, Brian, isn't it funny when you point shit out like this? On a press conference that was less than 24 hours ago. Somehow this is me pointing out the facts. And some of the stuff that we sit here for 4 hours with, and you guys call me a blatant liar, turns out to be exactly true. Look, you don't get pats on the back for validating yourself when Nolan Smith sucks. That doesn't help anybody. That's not a victory lap. But it's an ideology how they do business. On that side of the ball. It's not a victory lap. Here. Let's go to the other one here. Howie, I think it's a great message to our team that if you come here and do the right thing, you don't have to leave. Sills turns that into Howie re-signs everyone that he drafts. No, he keeps everyone. Jordan Davis should never have been starting after week 10. They played him, though. Why is the Kobe Dean in the starting lineup? Why is he number one on your depth chart right now? Why? What has he done to deserve that? Because Howie drafted him? Nolan Smith now gets Hassan Reddick's reps? Where did he come up with that? Because he drafted him. He didn't earn anything. The only reason that you get put in positions on defense on Howie's depth chart. It's Howie's depth chart, not Nick's. It's because you were drafted, not production. Jordan Davis is not produced. Nolan Smith is not produced. Jacoby Dean is not produced. I mean, none of those guys have produced. And get this, all I'm doing is, and I said, hey, Bob, did I not say this? I'm trying to get on the same page with you. Hey, Spin, I really, if you heard something different, well, wait a minute, Anthony, that's coaching, Sills, how he picks the coaches. I'm trying to get on the same page. What did you hear different? Spin, make them earn it. There's no competition on your roster. Nobody's competing for. When's the last time somebody competed for a job? Running back? Quarterback? Cornerback? Linebacker? Edge? Defensive tackle? When's the last time someone earned a job on the Eagles? And there was open competition. Right guard? Maybe? But no, they put Cam right in because they drafted him where? Howie's second round. That football team is in complete control of the hands of the general manager, and it is, without a doubt, an iron fist. I'm so conflicted because I'm also a Bulldog fan, so I want so bad for those guys to succeed, but sooner or later I have to accept the facts. Well, I would say this to you. Give them all a year here. See how it plays out. Look, I don't think they're not with talent. I just don't know if they're ever going to apply that talent, especially in what they're asking him to do. You're going to play Nolan Smith, Devin White, and Jacoby Dean in a 34, and they're not physically capable of playing in that, which makes absolute no sense. It makes no sense. Sills, Howie and Laurie have a plan that they are now willing to deviate from. They hired a DC with a scheme that we won't deviate from. It's a perfect match. That's why Doug and Reddick aren't here. Correct. When someone has pushback, get this. Hey, Bob, tell me if I read this right. A reporter had pushback on the Reddick deal. Fitness goes, when did Vic Fangio say he didn't want Reddick? I said that. I said that a week ago when he was not willing to be dropped in coverage. I said that. And that was part of the parameters on him leaving Miami and going to the Philadelphia Eagles to get the job. Turned out to be true. Get this. Think about this, Bob. A reporter pushed back on the Reddick deal, and Howie was a jackass to him. Can you imagine if a player had pushback in the locker room on how he was being used? What do you think the fallout would be? You're out. You're out. Sills, that reporter might have his credentials pulled and have legal... Right. That's correct. That guy asked a fair question. It was a follow-up question. I thought it was a very... Xander, do you know who asked that question? Because I think it's a guy that's been on our network. And it was a great follow-up because he follows it up by going, well, I mean, how do you, and I'm paraphrasing this part of it, how do you feel that that's good for the Eagles when they haven't extended him? And he could have been on the same deal here. How he goes, you're misrepresenting the deal. What's he misrepresenting? That you could have had the player like you had Hardgrave for the final year of his contract? And he could have left and went somewhere else? What was the crappy part of that question? Again, LJ says national gossip. Here, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to repost the Howie Roseman press conference with Nick. And I'm going to tell people, make your own assessment. Okay? Yeah. Make your own assessment. I don't think it's gossip when he says that how he picks the roster. Vic has had complete influence over our defense and the personnel the last 3 years. It's not gossip. That was in the press conference. Free agency fills gaps, mistakes. It's not gossip. That's what he said. I mean, when someone's asked a question and they answer it, you kind of get an understanding of what happened last year. And that goes to this. How about this? All those things that were said at that press conference. Now, I'll add this. This is me. Head coach needs Big Dom. Why didn't anyone ask that question? How important is Big Dom on the sidelines? Or didn't anybody have the balls to ask that question? I'd like to know if Derek Gunn's report is true. Are you afraid? Hey, Philly media, are you afraid? Ask Howie Roseman the importance of Big Dom on the sidelines for Nick. Here's a question I would ask. Is that report true? You had him. He was right in front of you. Why didn't you ask him? Are you afraid? Of course you're afraid. I could have asked general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles. Bob Lang might take your pass away right there. He might take your pass away right there. Hey, is it true that Nick Sirianni has to babysit, or Big Dom has to babysit Nick Sirianni on the sidelines and he's important? Yes or no? That's a BS story. Okay, I just wanted to hear it from the GM's mouth. Thank you, Howie. That's all he had to say. Even McMullen was mad about how Howie reacted to Reddick's question. Reddick had to have been insubordinate or something. Correct. And you want to know what insubordination is? Don't drop me in coverage. That's an opinion. That's an opinion. That I think that his insubordination was stop dropping me in coverage. Remember what he said? I do what the front office says. And it's a good question there. What did the Panthers and Cardinals get? They got nothing. But here's a guy that destroyed the NFC Championship game and won it by himself almost. You think he could have got a 7th rounder for him? I'm mad no one asked how they like their coffee. Thanks for the $2, dude. I would ask Howie this. How close were you to really, and how far did the conversations go with Bill Belichick on replacing Nick? You're right? That story's erroneous. That story is not true. Okay. Thank you, Howie. Why would you ask such a question like that? No, there's a report out there, ESPN, and they had it out there. And the worldwide leader in sports, this is not something, I'm just going off of what they said, that the Eagles were in conversation and we're seriously considering Bill Belichick to be the head football coach. And I'd like to get your take on it. How come no one asked that? You're afraid? Why are you afraid? You're afraid to do your jobs? I mean, Ty, again, Ty, I want to get on the same page with you more than anyone today. ESPN get this, Ty, I went off of a press conference and a report from ESPN, not Big Sills' takes. And no one asked any of these. Why? And when someone was asked a question about Reddick, he was a jerk. Now you know why Hassan Reddick is not on the team. That's an opinion. Anthony goes, Sills, why do you have to drill the GM every time he gives an interview? Well, don't you want to know why your team lost 6-7 at the end? Don't you want to know why you gave a player away? Don't you want answers on whether or not it was true that Belichick was in line to be the next head football coach of the Eagles and Sirianni's job was really on the line? Don't you want to know who actually picks the players and why there's been massive failure on defense? Don't you want to know why Vic Fangio's been given autonomy over the personnel and schematics of your defense? You don't want to know any of those questions? That's not drilling. That's asking a question about things that failed last year. What is wrong with, get this, no, last season is over. No. That's not true. He talked yesterday, LJ. He spoke of the draft. He spoke of the influence of Vic. He spoke of how they're looking at players. He spoke on how they're moving forward with gaps in free agency. That's not last year. That was yesterday. You're making shit up that I'm not even making up. Why wouldn't you ask a question of Belichick in that report from ESPN? Why wouldn't you? How about this? Let's go with LJ moving forward. Okay, let's move forward to the front page of the ESPN website. Is it true, Howie, that Bill Belichick was being considered for the head coaching job in Philadelphia when you guys were evaluating Nick Sirianni? Yes or no? Why didn't you ask that? It's an ESPN report. Why didn't you ask the question? Hood goes like this. Since when are you the voice? No, I'm just trying to ask a question that no one else will. That's rumor. ESPN has that on the front of their website, that Bill Belichick was in line to become the head coach and serious consideration was being put into it. Howie, is it true? No, that story's a lie. Thank you, Howie. Simple. Put it to rest. A major news sports agency had that on their website. You mean to tell me you don't want any? The greatest, winningest coach in the history of pro football was considered to be the head coach of the Eagles? And you don't want to know if the story's true? Influence doesn't mean decision-making from Vic. Okay, it's a great point that Fitness makes. Let's expand on that. Howie says that the trade was a win-win. Where? Belichick, head coach next season, book it, says Q. How is that a win? You got a lesser player with less production. How's that a win-win? Where? And you got nothing in compensation for 3 years. I mean, and 3 straight playoffs, and they were still thinking of firing him. Hey, Trag, explain that one. Everyone, by the way, Trag, Sirianni's job was on the line. How come nobody asked these questions? I think they got good value for Reddick. Yeah, 3 years from now. I'll let you know in 3 years. What is that? 2027? Okay. Hey, Ty, good value in 2027 with a guy who can't pick on defense. I'm sure it is. Here's Bob Sills. Here's the question to ask Nick. Late in the year, you said you would have fixed the side if you knew how to. The draft is a week away. Do you know today what caused the 23 crash? They can't ask questions like that. Key fobs will be revoked. Key fobs will be revoked. Here's another one. Here's questions that I would have asked if I was at that press conference. They would have never let me in the building. Because the final question what I went was, you talk about culture. Why'd they quit on you? And have you rectified the quitting? And how? To go along with LJ, since it was last year, do you have any explanations why the players quit, and have you addressed it? Why can't you ask that? Or are you afraid? This is not that difficult of a gig. This is not that difficult when you do your job correctly. And I agree with Xander. Jeff McClain is probably the closest thing you have. But anytime there's a national story or a major story in that building, local guys don't get it. They go national. So my point to you about the ESPN story that was put on the website today, not old news, today. How close was it to the head coach being Bill Belichick? Story's wrong. Okay. Did the players quit on Nick or the front office? Well, the front office runs the team. So here, let me throw this at you then. How many people believe that the ESPN story about Belichick is BS? That he was never going to be the head football coach? How many people believe that was? I saw Elliot Spitzer, Pauly Shore say that was never going to happen. So he's basically calling the ESPN story a lie. Okay, Steve says BS. Devontae says BS. Big Trag says 50-50. Anthony says BS. Okay. There's also a story on the front page of ESPN that says that Bill Belichick, LJ says it's BS. Okay. There's also a story that Bob Kraft called Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, and said, Bill's a headache, can't be trusted, and this would be a bad hire for you. How many people believe that story's true? This is all in the same day. How many people believe that that's true? Dirty D says true. Wickersham put a story out, Senor, that says and alleges that Bob Kraft, and Wickersham works for ESPN, that he called Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, and said, he's a cancer, he's a headache. And by the way, they're all supporting the Wickersham story. How many people believe that? Absolutely true. I believe both. Yet I still haven't gotten the answer to it. Kraft's still getting. How about this? Why in the world would Bob Kraft get in the way of Belichick being hired by someone else when Bill for the next 2 years is owed $25 million by the owner of the Patriots? After signing that extension, why would he not want that off his books and save $50 million? He was together for 25 years in New England that produced 10 Super Bowl appearances and 6 wins. How in the world does ESPN put that out? And then you turn around and go, Belichick was going to be the next head football coach. So they're either both BS and ESPN is lying, or they're both true. But your job as a local reporter is to ask the question if they're true or not. Not let them hang out there like low-hanging fruit. We all know the owners are in cahoots. But again, Dirty D, why would I get in the way of somebody that I'm still paying for the next 2 years $50 million? When Arthur Blank would pick that up and that tab up. That makes 0 sense. Whether you like Bill or not, you really feel you're okay paying a guy $50 million to not coach, but you just don't want him to coach anywhere else? It makes no sense. And you put a dent in your own legacy of your franchise since you owned it by demeaning the coach who brought you all that success. Makes no sense. But, okay, that you have to sit here and ask the question again. Okay? Listen to this. A source close to Belichick who wouldn't put his name on it. Like, who's the source? Is that another? I don't trust anything ESPN/CNN, MSNBC says. What source? Put your name on it. Bob Smith from the Boston Globe says there was no truth to that. Source says, when you see that, it's a lie. Source says. So Senor would believe a guy who's tied to, he believes a guy by the name of Source said. Source said that there was no truth. How do you know it wasn't the writer saying that? I'm reading the ESPN article. Well, don't you think it's in the best interest to ask the general manager if there was any truth to that? They printed it. They posted it. They wrote it. Wickersham put it out there. And it's even being reported that next year, the Cowboys, Eagles are somebody that Bill would covet being the head coach for. You're not going to ask the question? Wow. ESPN makes more stories up than I've ever seen anybody on the planet. And when I say something, like when Frank Wright tells me the inner workings of the Eagles, I put my source and my name on it. I don't do what Senor says. Some guy named Source said. Oh, no. Wicker Sam, Senor, get there. Senor, I'm not really talking shit to you, but get this. Colin Cowherd ran with that story that Bill was a jerk and that Kraft called Arthur Blank. And didn't reference, well, the Patriots have since completely vehemently denied that. And a spokesperson for Bob Kraft said that is absolutely not true. But they're not reporting that. They're covering for themselves. I mean, you got a source, put your name on it. I think Reddick was just pissed and wanted his money now. You know what, Christopher? Personally, I think Hassan Reddick used the money as an excuse to get out of there on how he was being used and knew that he had a better chance of getting double-digit sacks somewhere else than under Vic Fangio. I don't think the coach wanted to coach him, and I don't think the player wanted to play for him. Because you know what I haven't heard? Journalists today are jokes. It's all clickbait. Christopher, you know what I think? You know why Howie said it's a win-win? How about this one, Brian? You know why it's a win-win? The player didn't want to be here, and we didn't want the player here. It's a win-win. No money. Have you heard Reddick bitching about not having a new contract? Doesn't that tell you all you need to know? He's not complaining. He's happy being in New York. He's with Robert Saleh, who's going to use him correctly. I mean, and I think the agent used the money. He wanted $25 million. The Eagles said, absolutely not. And there was the vehicle to move him. Plus, he didn't want to play in that system with Vic. Dropping in coverage, that's not what that guy does. That's why he called it a win-win. And he went after the reporter when he said, what was it? You misrepresented the deal. How did the reporter misrepresent the deal with a simple question? I didn't think the question was out of line. That guy does not like his authority questioned. That's a control freak. Can't blame Reddick if that's the case. In my case, I hate to play plumber knowing damn well I'm a carpenter. Connecticut. That's why when he says it's a win-win, it's not a win for the next 2 years. It's just not. Ty, what I'm trying to do today, Ty, is pull you and me closer into what I heard at a press conference and the lack thereof questions on what happened last year too. Because how many people believe that last year could be something that could linger into this year if you haven't addressed it? I get it. I get it, Ty. But hey, Ty, would this not be a fair question? Since the players quit on you at the end of the season, what have you done this offseason to address that, to make sure that we don't go down that rabbit hole again? You know what he could have said? Well, we hired Vic. We're going to a 34. We've had team meetings. We've had bonding meetings. We've had, okay. I would have went, all right. No one asked the question. How do you know that's not going to spill over? You think Nick Sirianni is going to be a better coach in 24? Seals, here's the win-win. I gave Vic what he wanted. And when it blows up, it's on Vic. Yeah. Christopher, not addressing the collapse. And get this, Christopher, not one Philadelphia from the Inquirer or anyone would dare ask the question, what were some of the things that led to the team's demise that you have fixed this coming offseason here? Aren't those fair questions? Why can't you ask those questions in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to the number one property and sports team in your city? Why is that such a problem? Why can't you question your GM? LJ thinks this is shit talking questions. Get this. Here's a reporter's question. Howie, and I'll do it respectfully. Howie, with all respect, last year, the 1-6 collapse that we had at the end of the season. Can't quantify it any other way. But the collapse at the end of the season, what steps have you taken this offseason that you've addressed with the players? Because it just seemed that the players did not respond to anything at the end of the year. What have you done? See, the more you go on with a question, the less he has to answer. You don't want to make your question long on that. Is it true that the head coach needs Big Dom on the sidelines to control his emotions? That's a stupid question. Why? One of the most respected people in Philadelphia, Derek Gunn, who is very close to Big Dom, is a person that reported that, picked up a lot of traction. And, so it's not true. No, it's a stupid question. Stupid question for answering a report that someone put out there. Okay. All these things that came out of that presser, that's what I took out of it. Now, Ty, did I say anything wrong today that was over the line? You're a huge critic. And I'll take your criticism. I'll take your criticism. Did I say anything today that I misread from the press conference and questions I would ask? Anything you want, and I'll address it. I get criticized, people in my own business, for how I ask questions. Thank you, Ty. It means a lot, Ty. It does. And know this, Ty and I don't agree 85% of the time. Right here. Just today. That's a critic. So, I looked at that press conference and listened to it yesterday. I came away with questions that I still had. Thank you, Ty. And at the end of the day, we now know a hell of a lot more about how your team gets into the way of the ultimate success. Not success. It still is my friend now. Today. Ty. Today. Right? I'm Ty's friend today. Is that fair, Ty? We're friends today. Probably not tomorrow, but today we're friends. Right? Sills, I missed that. Hey, don't forget, man. Mark Holmes is going to join us at 3:30. We're going to set that up. We're going to have a simulcast with Cowboy fans. And this ought to be interesting. Cowboy Nation and Eagle Nation are going to be going back and forth here at 3:30 real soon here. So, Sills asked the question this way: Howie, you handed a Super Bowl team over to 2 rookie coordinators. Now you hired 2 experienced coordinators. Do these hires fix the gap in your coaching hires? Just today. Okay? You don't represent the Eagles. I don't represent anybody in the NFL. Did someone say my name? Yes, we did. You got to remember something. This is all going to be you guys. Eagle Nation and Cowboy Nation. That's what this bad puppy's going to be. I'm going to take a time out, and we're going to start getting ready to set this bad puppy up. Okay? We're going to go back and forth. Here we go. And I'm going to ask him some questions about the Cowboys, and he's going to ask questions about the Eagles, vice versa. We're going to go back and forth. Okay? And so that's how we'll do this. Okay? Fantastic. All I learned yesterday, though, from that press conference, the head football coach of the Philadelphia Eagles is Howie Roseman. And the other guy's a puppet. The GM said it. The GM said it. All right. Hit the like button. Keep it here, National Football Show.